Alrighty, well, welcome to submitting a successful SACSA and NASPA Region 3 proposal. My name is, contrary to what the screen says, not SACSA Zoom, but my name is Kim Bullington and I'm with Old Dominion University. I am joined by Melanie Graham, who's a doctoral candidate here at the university. She's the Director of Special Projects for our Student Engagement and Enrollment Services team. At Danielle Molina, who's an Associate Professor of Higher Education at Mississippi State. Pietro Sasso, who is an Associate Professor of Higher Education at Stephen F. Austin. Jason Wallace, who's an Assistant Professor of Higher Education at University of Southern Mississippi. And Kyle Williams, who is a Special Advisor to the Senior Vice President and Dean of Campus Life at Emory University. And today we're going to talk to you about some of the things that we've encountered as people who have submitted proposals in the past and what we're looking for, and kind of give you tips to make sure that your proposal process is as smooth as it can be. And this is also being recorded so that we will be sharing this with other people so that they can pass that on along to other people as well. So let's get started and welcome everybody.
Well, hello. I am coming to you from here at Atlanta, and we are excited to have you here join us on November 4th through 6th. Our conference theme is Reimagining Our Path Forward, to challenge ourselves, to change the current state of our profession and how we provide support and tools for success across our institutions. I think it's very important that as you are looking at all of these various topics that are listed below, that when you're thinking about your conference proposal and you're thinking about your journey forward and what you're going to propose, it is very important that you think about what the theme of the conference is. And so really thinking about how you look at diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and think about how you reimagine our path forward based on what's happening in our profession and what might be the things that you are currently doing within your current spaces, practices that you're doing. It could be things that you are working on, research that you have found, but really thinking about how you connect that specific topic to the theme is truly, truly important. So I do just want to put that out there as you're thinking about why propose at conferences. It's also I've used conference proposals, particularly in the new research area, to also even get feedback on how I can continue to improve from colleagues that are also doing the work. And so it's a great opportunity to think about that. It doesn't have to be something that you is tried and true, but something that even though your institution is trying within those areas, that you can also look and get feedback on to bring back to your institution. And so that's another good reason also to propose to do this at a conference, because it provides that dialogue that you may not always get from some of our keynote speakers. So see you here November 4th through 6th. Come, Atlanta's a great time. Hopefully it's not as hot as it will be during the summer, but nice cool temperatures for you.
Thanks, Dr. Williams. And so there are 3 opportunities to showcase your brilliance, musings, and your expertise at SACSA. Those include submitting a concurrence session, which we affectionately call a regular conference section, a pachacacha, or a poster session. And so the first opportunity is a concurrent session or a regular conference session, which is a traditional 50-minute breakout session. This is just an opportunity for folks to come and view your work. This is also an opportunity to be creative and engage your audience, right? So you have them captured for 50 minutes. It is a good time to really get into some good dialogue, lots of expertise in the room, really to have some interesting conversations across institutional types, across programs, things of that nature. And so definitely consider submitting a concurrent session if that interests you. The second thing I'll touch on is actually the poster session. And the poster session is specifically designed for to highlight faculty and graduate student research or practitioner research for those practitioners who may be engaged in research and assessment. And we're looking at both completed and in progress work. And so to Dr. Williams' earlier point around, this is a good opportunity to get some critical feedback on work that you may have in progress. If you have new promise projects, practicing practices, resources for the profession. All of these things are things that could be featured on a poster. What I really appreciate about the poster sessions is that it's a little less stakes, right? It's a smaller community. You either get to chat one-on-one or in small groups about your poster. You also get some passerbyers, right? Some folks who are just passively engaging with your poster throughout SACSA. And so you really get that engagement without the pressure of having to stand in front of a room for 50 minutes, right? And then the last opportunity that you have to get involved with SACSA is with a Pachakacha. And so if you have something that you don't think will take 50 minutes, but you want to share anyway, maybe a Pachakacha will be your route. And a Pachakacha is actually a Japanese word which means chit chat or chatter, which is for us a 20-20 presentation, meaning you present 20 slides with 20 seconds allotted to each slide. The beauty is you can do it in 6 minutes and 40 seconds and your presentation is done, right? So Pachakachas have very specific rules to follow to keep you on track in those 6 minutes and 40 seconds. For example, you have to talk about a student affairs related theme. You also can only use images in a Pachakacha. So there'll be no words, but you can use captions. But choose your images wisely to make sure that they're telling a compelling and visual enough to help your story kind of get across. And then lastly, the rules. You have 6 minutes and 40 seconds, meaning 20 seconds for each slide. You cannot stop or pause the presentation at any time, so you cannot jump back or skip ahead. And since the slides will auto advance in every 20 seconds, it is really important to practice timing so you can get all your stuff out, right? So we really want this to be kind of a fun showcase. And this is just really an opportunity for folks who want to take a more creative approach to presenting their work at SACSA to have that opportunity to do so. And so hopefully you'll take on one of those formats and submit a proposal.
Hello, everyone. I'm coming at you kind of half from Mississippi State University in Starkville, Mississippi, and half from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where I live. And I'm going to cover a little bit about how you should approach the conference proposal. Some of it may be sort of self-evident, and some may be a little bit insightful from having done it a few times. So let's move my screens over and we'll go through those steps. I think the very first piece of advice, and this is for SACSA, NASPA Region 3, or any conference proposal, is to make sure you read, understand, and follow the instructions in the call for proposals. It's important that if there's any word limits or if there's instructions about how to couch your title. Some conferences, for instance, prefer that you follow the theme and that you play the theme out in your title. And others say, please don't do that. Like, don't artificially do that. Make sure you read through that and understand what they're asking for. And if possible, and some conferences are better, or some associations are better than others, try to check out the proposal format. So the actual site that you're entering the information to before you put it in, because it may have the word limits in that space and maybe not in the call. I usually try to get as far as I can with the proposal as possible before I actually write it. And then I do it all in a Word document, and I keep tab of the kind of word requirements, et cetera. Because sometimes those requirements will be really, really, like, they'll actually not let you put more words in than you thought, or you've counted them in Word and it's a different word count in the program. So you just want to have all that information available. I like to have a hard copy of mine just so that I can edit it if I need to do last minute edits before I submit it. And it's a good idea to think about, or you want a good idea, right? You want something that's contemporary, that's relevant to the conference, as we've already talked about. Think about your audience. You know, SACSA is filled with practitioners in the South, for instance. That may be something that's that generates an idea different than if you're going to a research conference full of just faculty. There are certainly faculty at SACSA as well, but I would say the largest number of Participants are practitioners, so I would think about that. And I would think about topics that are generalizable in some way. So you can certainly talk about what's going on in your office or at your institution and what kind of good work you're doing or big questions you've generated from something you've done. But remember that people come to a conference to learn something. So they're going to want to know how this can apply to them, what they can take and transport to their offices, their divisions, their institutions. So when you're thinking about the title, and I often actually do the title last, unless you've been inspired by a catchy title and you've had it in your brain for like a year and that's your starting place. But mostly I do that last and think about a descriptive, possibly catchy title. Don't make it catchy just to be humorous or just to make it catchy. The title and the abstract are the two things that the audience is going to use to make a decision as to whether to come to your program. So you want to make sure that you convey all the important information and any insight about what will happen in that session in those two pieces of information. And they'll be very constrained. There's only going to be a certain number of words you can use in that abstract. So try to be as descriptive as possible so that people can make informed decisions about what they're going to get into if they come to your session. Compelling argument. Why should the audience care? And usually this can be done in one sentence. It's kind of hard, but one sentence in your abstract that helps people understand like what's important about the information that you want to share. I think from a reviewer's perspective, it also helps us understand what makes it new, interesting, intriguing, insightful, which is what we all go to a conference to do, is learn something new, intriguing, insightful for our own work. Think about what evidence you can bring to suggest that you have expertise in the discussion you're having. And so that can be anchored in a lot of different experiences. You can have work experience that would give you expertise, but you also can use scholarship to suggest that you have expertise. And have you read the most recent literature? Have you read the Chronicle of Higher Education? Can you connect it to trending issues, even if you don't have like full out like theoretical scholarship? This is one of the things I think reviewers, at least the faculty reviewers, are looking to kind of separate the best practices from best practices plus, or to couch something as truly academic or scholarly. I'll say an example is every year since I've been doing this since the mid-90s, someone will put in a proposal that goes something like this. We are 15 graduate students who want to tell vice presidents for student affairs how to better supervise us because they're missing the mark. And so one of the questions is, do you understand your audience? And is that appealing? Is it appealing to the vice presidents for student affairs, who you said are your audience members, to come to a session and be lectured by 15 current graduate students? So, you know, usually those proposals don't get through really easy. So the question is, how can you change either the scholarship that's in there to suggest you have something new to say, or how can you change the angle you're taking to really speak to the people that you want to speak to? So think about the way that your voice takes on expertise. And like I said, there's a lot of ways that can happen. It's just important from a reviewer's point of view to help your program stand out. Most of the program proposals are going to ask you for a roadmap showing that you have a plan of action for the presentation. That doesn't mean you have to outline every single detail and every single talking point that you're going to address, but you do want to think in broad strokes. They want to see that you can fit everything you have to say into whatever time allotment it is. So if it's a conference proposal, a regular conference proposal, that's 15 minutes. Sometimes there's far too many talking points for 15 minutes. And so a reviewer might ask, is this even realistic that we're going to get through this? Or sometimes there's not enough information for 50 minutes. And we want to know how you're going to leverage your time to like fill that whole 50 minutes with information, activities, engagement, etc. Activities, engagement, you don't necessarily need that. Although I would say at SACSA, there is sort of a culture of inviting people into dialogue, discourse, discussion, activity. The only caution there is be careful, because some activities take a long time to kind of get moving and get really into. And so you're going to have to be really creative with like short activities that you can discuss within the time allotted. But think about the way you're going to use your time. That sometimes helps reviewers just see what's going to happen in your mind. And as we'll talk about later, it sets you up to really have the roadmap for what you're actually going to do if you get accepted later on. So you do a lot of the work on the front end rather than figuring it out on the back end. Like I said, consider how you might engage the audience. And that might be as simple as a discussion, as complex as an activity or something that's planned, but note those take time. So you have to really think through the logistics of how that might work. Think about when you've gone to conferences and you have a lot to say on a topic that's really intriguing to you and mostly you're lectured at. I think that's what we're trying to fight against in some of these spaces, is to make sure we're like bringing everybody into the dialogue. And so that is what I have to offer.
Greetings, everyone. Seems to be the general consensus to tell you where we are. So I am live in Norfolk, Virginia, the 757, just a quick direct flight away from Atlanta. Looking forward to touching down in November. So Dr. Williams shared with us the importance of consulting the conference theme and even checking out that list of topics that's available, right? And we just heard from Dr. Molina as she talked about making sure that you are selecting a relevant, generalizable, transferable topic. But you still might be thinking, but what is a good topic, right? You're giving me all of these touch points, but how do I take it a step farther? So I'm here to just remind you, lean into whatever it is that's making you excited right now. Right? What are you interested in? Because chances are other people will also be interested in that. So tell us about what you're doing and how it is you got there to be doing it, right? Whether it's a research project that you're working on in tandem with someone else, or maybe you just secured grant funding and you're really excited about your intervention. Perhaps you're launching a new program at your institution and you're on the ground floor doing grassroots work, reimagining what engagement looks like. Regardless of whatever it is, talk to us about it. And if you're not convinced that you're actually doing anything at all, one, we can connect offline and I will help you reframe your thinking, because you definitely are doing good work. But two, lean into, number one, yourself, right? Your identities, the intersections of your identities, and then also lean into what's happening around you. So what discussions are you having on your own campus? Whether it's in a classroom, in a team meeting, across offices, departments, divisions. And maybe you also want to consider what, in your opinion, isn't being discussed enough. So I can say from a personal example, last year I kept hearing the word advocacy and specifically self-advocacy. And I was hearing this buzzword in different spaces, right? I was hearing it in an introduction to student affairs class that I was a teacher's assistant in. I was hearing it at our first year summer orientation programs, how we need to do better to foster a help-seeking culture. But in my opinion, no one was taking it a step farther, because self-advocacy, it's a learned skill, but who's teaching it? And it was as simple as that. Then I connected with one of my peers and I said, let's talk about this because it's being discussed in different spaces, but I want to talk about it more and I want to be intentional about it. So just spend time thinking about what message, in your opinion, needs further dissemination. right? What do you personally want to explore more and then go out and talk to other people about? Maybe it's an idea that you came across as you were doing a common read at your institution. That's definitely happened to me as well. But really just lean into whatever it is that's making you excited, because that excitement will be conveyed in your conference proposal. And then hopefully that excitement will lead to you being accepted to present as well.
All right. So I'm Pietro Sasso. I'm a faculty member here at SFA in the great and interesting and complex land of Texas. So let me talk a little bit about what reviewers are looking for. So certainly if you're comparing SACSA to other conferences, think about who the reviewers are, right? These will be faculty, educators, largely student affairs professionals, right? And so that's who's reading it. So you want to write your proposal, like I think we have said in previous slides, that who is reviewing it and writing and who will be attending it, right? So making sure that you're using the higher ed vernacular, the higher ed jargon, right, without being too trendy, right? Like you just don't want to use words for the sake of using words. So you want to make sure that you look at the framework provided by SACSA, right? Reviewers will be looking for things that may not be explicitly stated in that framework and those expectations, right? And one of those is making sure that you're using the professional vernacular of student affairs that is grounded in the research, okay? So making sure, right, and so as a professor, this is something that I stress to my students a lot as well, ground your argument and your proposal in the research, right? And ones that are relevant, right? Making sure that it's recent, right? There is some research that is foundational or seminal, right? Like if you're talking about student involvement theory, right? Like you want to cite Aston, okay? So making sure that you're citing the relevant theory is really important, as well as ones that are more seminal or foundational. Now, some proposals may not include citations or references, but really they should. So please make sure that you have those. A lot of folks ask how much is too much. Just be mindful of your word count. I tend to oversight. So I err on the side of caution as like a researcher and as someone that worked in student affairs. I still tend to oversight. So one of the other things that SACSA asks of your proposals is to weave in theory. So you don't just have a theory to have a theory, right? Don't just like slap it up there. In the same ways you wouldn't make a pop culture reference just to have it. Make sure that you have a theory that is intentional. So going back to student involvement theory, are you talking about student leaders, right? Are you talking about other nuanced forms of student involvement, like leadership programs or pre-college bridge programs, right? So think about how theory connects to what your topic is, and is it germane to what you are talking about, right? Like you can't. So I think one of the common things I notice is a lot of people misuse a theory, and so they pick the wrong theory. So making sure that you pick one that is intentional and that you know what you are talking about. And so you need to make the connections clear between your subject and your theory, okay? So like don't pick apples and oranges, right? So like I wouldn't pick like a rock song to talk about a rap album, right? Like it just wouldn't work very well. So the other thing that you want to think about, again, is who is reading this in terms of the reviewers, and what are some of the limitations of your proposal. So what I mean is that are the implications that you're talking about broad enough to appeal to practice related to your topic? So going back to the example, if you are talking about student involvement, are the implications just to your university and like university type? So if you're drawing from private schools, right, like small, like liberal arts, residential privates, can you make your suggestions for practice broader, right, than just where you're from? And so like you want to avoid statements like at my university, right? So if you're sharing a program from your like university, or assessment findings, or like program evaluation findings, make sure that you make the connections between your subject and make it broader, right? So that it's, so if you are talking about minority serving institutions, right, are you talking about HSIs or HBCUs, right? And so like you want to be careful how broad they are, is what I'm saying as well. So other things you want to think about is not just institutional type, but making sure that they're specific and narrow to the area of practice, right? So if you talk about student involvement, are you also talking about FSL, student activities, leadership programs? You can't really lean into housing as much unless you start talking about LLCs or other things like that, right? So making sure that their implications are targeted but broad to the specific areas of practice that your proposal is about. Okay. So to make things even more complex, each year there is a conference theme, right? So how does your proposal fit the conference theme? Again, if the conference theme is about rap, you can't make it about rock, right? It's just not going to work. So you want to make sure that it's germane and that everything fits. Okay. Now, your theory and does not have to fit the conference theme, right? Like that's the theory for, so not all things have to fit all of the time, right? So, but you want to make sure that your theory specifically fits your topic, but not inherently the conference theme. The other things too, in terms of reviewers, is you want to be clear on what the problem is. A reviewer should be able to say, this is the topic, this is the problem of practice, and that you have a very clear purpose statement, and that you clearly are saying what you want to talk about, and that it's grounded in the research. So you can't just stand up there and have a giant like lit review. That's helpful, but that's more of a conference paper presentation they would see at another type of research conference. Okay, so making sure that you have clear connections both to research as well as to practice, and that's not going to get muddled in what your topic might be. Reviewers are mostly looking to clear connections to the conference theme and connections to practice, and that those are explicitly stated, okay? And they are looking to clear connections, I think, to specific forms of practice across the functional areas, as well as like multiple university types, okay? So you want to make it narrow, but not overly broad.
Well, thank you. So I think we've gotten a lot of information on, what types of things we are presenting on. We also got information on the types of presentations that we could do, all the things that go into it, things that to be considered. But the questions that I have for myself, then also some people from our panel here, are really like, what are some of the common proposal mistakes that you have seen? And a mistake that you have made or you've made in submitting a proposal. So to get us started, as people were thinking about those two questions and letting them percolate, I would say that one of the things that I have noticed, my team just got 2 rejections and 1 acceptance from a conference I will not name in this space. But it is one of the mistakes that I was working with my team on, is that the 2 that did not get accepted did not have the conference theme in them, where mine did. And so I think when you're looking at the ability to connect the conference theme together, while I think sometimes as a reviewer, it's great, but you also get tired of reading, like reimagining if all of these things are happening, right? But the ability to also make sure that you're thinking about what are the words that are even in the conference theme. So, the reimagine, as I'm thinking about a conference proposal that I'm probably going to submit, would be something that I would pull out of, particularly of what we're looking at right now. So, but that's a common proposal mistake that I've made. And then I think another one that I made also in submitting is that I did not spend enough time really mapping out exactly how I was going to utilize all 50 minutes, or that there was just so much information that we were going to go over time. And so even thinking about how you might say that this, in the introduction or in the description, that this is kind of like something to tee it up so that you are able to make sure that individuals understand what they're getting from the presentation. Also, what are the kinds of things that I did as an engagement? I mean, discussions are great, but sometimes is there an activity, as I'm thinking about when I did it, ACPA, is there an activity that will definitely get to the point of what we're trying to discuss? And so if you're doing something, like the proposal was, trying to get engagement, but instead of doing a large engagement, is it possible that I could have did smaller group discussions and have people share out what those are going to be, versus expecting everyone to have a dialogue? I think we have to remember that sometimes our presentation proposals could be so on point that, we don't know if the room is going to be packed or if it's going to be, 5 or 6 people. And so I think it's also important to really plan for that. A presentation I did, and this is just an example, I did around Black bodies and Title IX. I thought, well, this is great, right? We're talking about intersectionality of Black bodies and Title IX process. And there'll probably be like, 10 or 15 people. The room was completely full, which was also very intimidating. And so when we started having some of the discussion points, we had to pivot and think about how we pivot in a way that allows interaction for everyone to be heard. But then also thinking about other opportunities, even, are there handouts that you can provide, even to kind of give that kind of feedback, something tangible to take away. So those are some of the mistakes that I have made, and even thinking about common proposal mistakes that people may not always think about, because we are quick to go to Q&A or discussion, but really spending time thinking about what are ways we can engage, as well as even is there a new theory that's out there? Are you challenging a theory that's already been presented? While we're using a theory, it might be, I'm using Aston's theory, but yes, I'm also going to present on why Aston's theory is not inclusive. So like, those are kinds of things that, and someone picks this up, just give me a little bit of credit in that, cite me. But those are some of the things that I think that we a lot of times, I think, as a reviewer see, like, you don't have to make your presentation just so tight to a theory, but think about, what are you doing? How is that theory being utilized? But those are some of the common proposal mistakes that I've seen, and then also some of the things that I have done. Other feedback from other people on the panel, or questions? We have questions in the chat.
I can join in. I'd say, when I was in grad school, and probably as a new professional. I had a lot of imposter syndrome around going to conferences, knowing what to do at conferences. And I'd come from a big program, at least from a practitioner perspective. So I had been socialized, but I just didn't ever really have the touch or the mentorship for how to do them. And I think one of the mistakes I made is that I kind of assumed good writing and good proposals happen in a cave individually on your own, right? That was your responsibility to like magically come out of your cave with a perfect proposal. And so I didn't pacify anyone. I didn't like engage a faculty member or a scholarly practitioner to take a look at it beforehand. And so I got rejected the first time, and then I didn't put something in until 10 years later when I was in my doctoral program and was, forced to do so, because I just assumed that that meant I wasn't part of the club. Right. And so I think it's really important to find people who have gotten proposals accepted before and just let them have a look at it. Trust that they can kind of shape up things that need to be shaped up really quickly. I had a proposal for SACSA. One of my students had it, and it was a good idea, but it kind of just went in all directions. I literally could help shape that up in 10 minutes. And then she was able to get that proposal accepted at 3 different conferences, just tweaking a little bit, because like, I know now, having actually gone to conferences, like what we're looking for on the backside and how to kind of, get to the meat of the issue. But don't feel like you have to go it alone. And if you don't have anyone that you either are connected to or that you trust or that you feel you can be transparent with, or even, that you can kind of open up your heart and soul to, find one of us. We're all willing to help. I think that's one of the magical parts of SACSA, is that we try to take away a lot of those barriers of getting involved in academic, scholarly, and association activities. It doesn't take us much time if you have some ideas on paper. So like that may be the second part. Don't wait till the last minute to do it. Get some ideas on paper, let it roll around in your mind, at least take a few days, if not a week, to get something together. But it's a dialogue. Scholarship is much more of a dialogue than you're ever taught that it is, especially when you're on the faculty side of things. So like use that tip when you're starting to get conference proposals together. It will just like fast track you into getting something substantive.
And if I can just do a quick plug, I think that the other piece about when you're doing proposals is that I think, to what Melanie said, if you have this thought, there are probably others that also have this thought. And so I'm thinking about sometimes like in the MAC committee, being able to talk about this on, in those meetings, you might also find people that can partner with you and help you, so you're not going at it alone, which also can kind of take that daunting experience off. Like I don't have to do it by myself. There are people who can also write with me, and then you might even have a scholar or a scholar practitioner or a practitioner who can really help. And maybe they have the same idea and they can join with you. And so there's the ability to even build community across one idea, because I think, to what Dr. SACSA was saying, we do want it to be something that is not specific to your institution. Maybe it's a thought that you have people from across various institutions that have had these experiences. And then you're able to, because of the fact that you have people from different institutions presenting, you are getting different perspectives and different knowledge and different content based on their institutional knowledge. And so, don't be afraid to also share that. And I know that there's this, we fear sometimes someone's going to steal our ideas, but the ability to think about how we are sharing and that we are inviting people in is also very key and important. And even if you don't know anybody at your institution, or you're a grad student, or you're, in any space, I mean, we can also connect you with individuals that we talk to, or maybe different graduates, programs who may be also able to kind of lean in and say, I have someone who wants to write that. Does anybody want to join? So that's another fear or another tidbit.
I'll just add to Dr. Molina's kind of earlier point around imposterism. I think the biggest mistake that I made in my early years of SACSA is just not submitting because I didn't feel like I knew enough or that I was ready, right? So kind of giving a nod to that earlier comment around this academic conversation that we're having. If you are a practitioner, if you are a grad student, new professionals, I just want to encourage you all specifically that you have stuff to offer, that you have expertise, you have a very unique perspective that we need to hear in the field. And so please consider submitting, right? And tapping someone who's submitted before so you can get those tweaks, but don't discount your ideas and give yourself a rejection before you even submit the paper, which is something that I've had to learn not to do, which is a process. So I just want to encourage you all to submit that proposal.
And then I
Yes,
would
if you
just
don't put anything in, you won't get into the
automatic no. Yeah.
conference.
And I would just add that, just because we're up here doesn't mean that we don't get rejections all the time. And that is something that, we have to lean through. And sometimes we spitball things and throw them out there and say, is this going to stick? Is this going to work? And then all of a sudden, your least probable idea is the one that gets accepted. So don't be afraid to do 2 or 3 proposals. I know it's a lot of work, but you have a lot of ideas that you can translate into something that's really cool and innovative for SACSA and for other associations as well.
And I Dr. Simpson, you just said that, like, it's the ability to know that, yes, we've all had rejections. I think I leaned in that I had too. But the other thing is, just because you're rejected does not mean that it's not a good idea. It could mean that it's not fitting at that time. It may not be, we may have had like 10 proposals on the same topic. And have to kind of figure out how to streamline one. So to what Dr. Molina was saying, like, save them in a Word document. Because there are some proposals I come back to and I'm like, this needs to be talked about again. And I can just pull it out and utilize it. Or this is where this conference is leaning this year. And so, yes, I might've got rejected at SACSA or I got accepted at SACSA and I can use it at multiple spaces. And so that's important. And the other thing I would also encourage people to do, and I don't think this is, it might be next, but practice with your teammates at your school. Like, think about how practice with your supervisor. Like, that's another good opportunity as you're preparing for it and you're preparing to submit it, is also an area of support.
So I would add to, if you're a new professional or a grad student, co-present with someone first, right? Your professors, your supervisor, a group of people. If you have an interest in presenting, I'm sure there is someone who would love to work with you, who would love to connect in some way, to have you on their actual, presentation team in some way. So I think sometimes you may not have to help write the proposal. We can jump on it along the way. So I think that's a good way to make it, mildly accessible if you're kind of new but nervous. And so then you present your like, small little sliver of a larger presentation. And then maybe a year or 2 later, you start to submit your own. So I think there are ways, you can kind of lean into it slowly if that does make you nervous. I think the other thing that I would add to is make sure you spell check your proposals and use grammar check, and don't use Chat GPT or the replacement word software packages. It's gonna sound, they're helpful, but they don't inherently make your writing sound cohesive, right? Like it's like a different voice than what you're writing in. And so that stands out, that like there's a shift in tone and style as you read it. So it's not as cohesive, right? It might be coherent, but it's not cohesive. So please make sure you spell check. Like, I've made those like mistakes where, it's a last minute thing. I hit submit and then I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't spell check that. So learn from me, don't do what I do and run spell check and actually grammar check. And there will be small typos. That's not the end of the world. It's not going to get you rejected, but it will take away from the readability.
And I would just also say that I don't know who is a master's or a new professional student here, but some of the most interesting sessions that I've been to at SACSA especially have been culminating projects or capstone projects and what you found during those things. So don't be afraid to take your student research and advance that into a SACSA proposal as well. Do we have any questions from the audience? No, okay.
Okay, so as we're kind of moving toward the wrap up, let's talk about what happens if your proposal actually gets accepted. I think we've also kind of indicated what you should do if a proposal gets rejected. Don't toss everything away. Think about what the feedback might be. Talk it over with people who understand the scholarly terrain and how to maybe reshape it. Think about, and I really appreciate Dr. Williams' perspective, like think about whether that can be repackaged later. It will be more relevant to a different audience or more important at a different time. I do emergency management research, and my collaborator and I often say, like, people have sort of like a taste at certain times in history for it, and then they just don't want to talk about it anymore. So sometimes people are just like totally exhausted with emergency management, like COVID conversation. Is COVID still trendy, or are we just like really not wanting to talk about COVID, or only in specific ways, right? As opposed to shootings, like school shootings, we've had like times where people want to hear it and times where people are just so like downtrodden that they can't have another conversation about it, right? So we've talked about that. If you do get in, first you should celebrate and pat yourself on the back because you've done a great job getting through the filter, through the reviewers, and making it relevant to the conference. And then you got to get to some work. The proposal, as I said earlier, is an outline for your presentation. So if you did due diligence in the proposal, you already know what you have to do. Sometimes I'll even put away the proposal. I'll get accepted. I'll put it away until about a month, a week. We'll be generous and say a week before the conference, and I'll realize I already have it all figured out. I just have to fill in the blanks and create a visual presentation or a set of activities that literally follows my own outline. I gave myself the handbook. So use your proposal as the handbook for what you need to do in order to prepare. And then you can tweak it in some ways, but I would say be very careful about like saying that you're going to do one thing and getting accepted under one auspices, and then totally shifting or pivoting your topic, your ideas, etc. Because if you go too far off of your plan, then you're kind of selling a false product. Right? You don't want to be the snake oil salesman in this situation. And I've had people come back from conferences and say, like, it said this, and then I went to it and it was a completely different program and that was a waste of my time. And you don't want to engender bad feelings from your audience, right? If you got accepted and if people are choosing to go to it via the title and the abstract that you set out, just make sure it's honest to that pitch you put out in the first place. There will be usually in our field, especially a conference proposal slide template that the association will send out in an email or link you to through their own conference website. So we were just talking before we got on today about whether or not the SACSA one is the one we're using right now. It hasn't been approved, but you'll see something like this that brands the association and the specific conference, and also increasingly uses accessible habits and techniques in visual formats. Now that's going to feel a little awkward. I'm very visual, so I like to get really fancy and layer lots of text on lots of pictures, but from an accessibility perspective, that's actually really difficult. And so often the templates will help guide you to make sure that that it's accessible to people with low vision or those with other kinds of disabilities, that it would affect their ability to read, and or it's not only their ability to read in real time, but also to have a computerized or technology reader access the information so it can do the translation. You can also use your own template if the one that we offer is not available, or we say you don't have to use it. Usually your institution will have some kind of uniform or universal template that you can use. So you can look into that too if you want to brand it along with your university standards. And we've talked about this a little bit. I think Dr. Williams talked about setting up recurring meetings with your team to practice. Don't underestimate what it's like to go in front of an audience and to play this out in real time. I think maybe this goes back to the mistakes, is when you don't practice, you think, I'm never going to get 50 minutes. But we all as faculty and lecturers know that 50 minutes goes by really fast, and you actually have a ton to share in 50 minutes. And so you'll want to practice so that you get through in the time allotted, and so that you don't miss opportunities that are important. Usually what will happen is you'll extend the beginning material accidentally, and then you'll have to rush through discussion activities and implications. And that's the biggest part of it. That's the fun stuff that everybody's waiting for. So practice just helps temper your sense of like benchmarks for the time that's allotted.
Of course, I was muted. Thank you, everybody, for coming to this. These are QR codes for the proposal transmittal form, as well as a website that we created with some more tips and tricks for you guys. And I think one of the things that we didn't really touch is becoming a program reviewer. Becoming a program reviewer has really helped me learn about what I don't like to see and what I do like to see. And I think that has helped me advance in my scholarly pursuits as well. So definitely consider becoming a program reviewer. Don't say, I'm just a graduate student, I can't do it. Yes, you can do it. You should absolutely be doing this. This is absolutely great practice for you guys to understand what is involved in the process. And you'll see some really bad proposals, and you'll see some really great proposals. And then I forget who said this, but just because your proposal is not accepted does not necessarily mean that it's bad. It just means that we have 200 slots for proposals, and we have filled 200 slots with proposals. So there's a lot of things that you should consider. And I'm the programs chair, so if you guys were to have something that was rejected, I would be glad to go over that proposal with you, as well as any of the people on this call, to go over any of the questions that you have just to make the proposal better. Or you can reach out to me pre-proposal, and I can try to help you narrow that down as well. So unless you have any questions, we are done, and we thank you very much for coming to our session on creating a great SACSA NASPA Region 3 proposal.